And explain how to create and manipulate shapes within Illustrator. There are so many different things that we could do here and so many different ways of creating shapes. I'm just going to go with some of the more straightforward tools here. So in Illustrator right here, we have what's called the rectangle tool. If you click and hold your mouse button down for a second, you basically will get all these different options. So I have a rounded rectangle, ellipse, polygon, star. And basically the rectangle, any of these tools with the exception of the flare, basically what it's going to do is allow you to click and drag whichever shape in whichever size and sort of proportion that you would want. And it's going to fill that shape with your fill color, whatever that happens to be, which you could change later, of course, just like anything else. So let's say I drag this, I'm going to get a red rectangle. If I were to select this red rectangle with my selection tool, I can open up my colors palette. Where did my colors palette go? It's probably hidden somewhere. So let me just open it back up again. Window, color. There it is. It's set to the every once in a while, this happened in my other video too. If this happens where you are only noticing the color that you see in your selection, you might have to click up here and go to RGB to open up your full palette. But I could click around here and change this to whatever color I want. I can also now add a stroke to this. So when I click on this object, it has a red line, a bounding box around the outer edge. But that's just because it's showing me that it is selected. The actual object is just a blue rectangle. There definitely is no red there. What if I wanted this to have a color around the outer edge, which is called a stroke? Remember, stroke from Photoshop would put a solid line around your layer. It was one of the layer effects you could add along with drop shadow or a couple of those other things. Well, here's your stroke color. The stroke color is it's in back of your fill color, and it is just nothing. It has a line through it. There is no stroke by default. If I were to click here to bring that color forward so that it is in front of the fill color, now whatever color I click on is going to be my stroke color. Now, it may not look like it's happening here because my stroke is set to 1 point. It is very, very, very small. So I would have to really zoom in to see that stroke. Where is it? Yeah, it is. It is really, really small. And now it went away completely, which is awesome. So I'm going to click here again and add my stroke. There it is. I don't know why it went away there. But now this has a stroke. If I were to back up, I can increase the size of the stroke or decrease the size of the stroke just by clicking here. Or I could get in here and do it manually. Put exactly how big I want it in points. And then if I were to change the size or shape of this, it is going to conform to whatever size or shape I add. So I can just click on this and make it whatever shape I want. I can make it fill my background. Here's the thing with with Illustrator. If you need your background color to be anything other than white, you cannot just take a paint bucket and fill it in like you could in Photoshop. That's how you could change your background from white to any other color. You need to drag a rectangle around your artboard and make sure that is in a layer that's below everything else so that it functions as your background. So what I want to, let's say I'd like to do that. First of all, I don't want to stroke on it, probably. Maybe I will, but I'm just going to come up here and I'm just going to click none. I'm just going to get rid of the stroke and bring this forward. I don't know if I'd want my background to be that dark, but I would just come here and I would just drag this to the edge and just make sure that it's going directly to the edge of your artboard. If you miss a little bit of it like that and there's some white showing, that's going to show in your image when you save it, when we critique it, and we're going to be talking about it. So make sure that it goes straight to the edge. And then in your layers palette, you're basically just going to have to make sure that, and this is all looking kind of weird because I have the same the same layers that I was using in the other tutorials. So I'm just gonna delete some of this stuff. I'm just going to call this my background just to be safe. And I would just have to make sure that all of my other imagery goes on top of that. And I could do that by just creating a new layer on top of this. And if this layer basically is selected when you add your other things, that all of those new things should be created within that layer. If not, if they get created somewhere down here, you could just click and drag them into that layer manually if you have to. So again, we can create simple shapes like that. The ellipse and the other things are fairly straightforward. With the rectangle and the ellipse and the rounded rectangle, if you need a perfect square or a perfect circle, you need to hold the Shift button. And if you hold Shift, I'm holding Shift now and dragging, it is impossible for me to make a rectangle. No matter what I do, I'm going to get a square because Shift is basically going to constrain those proportions to a perfect square. If I had my ellipse tool and I hold Shift, it's going to be a perfect circle rather than an actual ellipse that I drag by hand. So there's that. The other thing is the polygon and the star. Polygons and stars, by default, I do not have to hold Shift. This is just going to be perfectly symmetrical no matter what. So there's my 6-sided polygon. But hey, what if I want fewer sides or more sides? What if I want a perfect rectangle? Well, to do that, you don't click and drag. You just click one time anywhere on your artboard. And it brings up this box that allows you to choose the size of your polygon and how many sides you want it to have. The size is sort of arbitrary. How do I know what 64 pixels, 64.3126 pixels is going to be? Well, I don't. It chose that size not randomly. It chose that because the last thing I created was that size. So now I know if I make a triangle just with 3 sides, you can't go any lower than 3 because it has to be a solid object. It has a minimum of 3 sides. Now if I click OK, I'm going to get a triangle that should be the exact same size as the polygon I had before. So again, pretty straightforward there. The same with the star. Your star tool by default is a 5-pointed star. If I click once, I can make it as many points as I want. And it's going to be the same size as it was. With any of these, again, I could come over here with this object selected. I could bring my stroke forward, and I could say, give me a dark blue stroke on that. When I click off, there's a dark blue stroke on that particular object. I could also manipulate these things further. Every object you create in Illustrator, first of all, is a vector. All of these objects, if we were to zoom in, will have perfectly crisp and straight lines. They're automatically vectors because they're created by Scratch in Illustrator. The only time you need to image trace something to turn it into a vector is if it's an actual image, if it's something that was pixel-based to begin with. So not only are these vectors because they were created directly in Illustrator, but you can see that they're made up of paths and anchors. So if I were to come over here with my direct select tool, just like we were doing with the logo manipulation, If I select that anchor at the top, I could drag it straight up. Notice that there's a little pink vertical line there. That's basically telling me that this is perfectly centered. Like this is I dragged it perfectly centered with the middle of the shape. As soon as I go off center, that line goes away. So I could do things like that, right? I could drag this out or whatnot. I could also convert these anchors, which are basically angles, to curves. Why would I want to do that? Well, I don't know. What happens if I click on this anchor point here and convert it to a smooth? Well, now I have this shape. Now I could drag my handles and make this whatever shape I want. I could also add and delete anchor points like I talked about before. So I could add another anchor point here. Oh, okay, please use add anchor point on a segment of a path, which basically means I must not have been moused over it perfectly. Now it let me do that. Now I could click on that anchor and manipulate that as well, and manipulate that curve. I could also delete anchor points and create a much simpler shape, like so. And that's the beauty of Illustrator, basically, is that you can continue to create and manipulate these shapes long after you've created them. So you can keep manipulating the color. You can continue to manipulate the shape of them, whether or not they have a stroke, and whatnot. If you have multiple images and you want to change them all to the same color, you can just basically click and drag a box around them with your selection tool. And now any color that you click on is going to change them all to that same color. There's also a way to further manipulate shapes. So what I'm going to do here is just make this kind of small. What I want is two differently colored objects. I'm just going to show you what can happen, or how we can create more dynamic and more complex shapes out of simple shapes. So this whole work through is called the Pathfinder. So I'm just going to show you what I'm going to do here. So I have one solid shape overlapping another. I have my blue star on top of my my green polygon. I'm just going to select these and I'm going to copy it and paste it, because I have a couple of different things I'm going to do. So I'm just going to paste it again, and paste it again. And I want to spread these apart so I can work on them without like interfering with the others. And I'm just going to select both of my objects here. Then I'm going to open up what's called the Pathfinder. So I'm going to go to Window, Pathfinder, which is this little box that pops up. And it basically is going to allow me to choose these different shape modes. So the first one is called Unite. And you have to have only two objects that are overlapping, like this. And you have to have them both selected. When you click Unite, it unites those objects. It basically glues them together into one solid object. So now you have a new shape that is both of those objects united. It took the color of the blue star because the blue star was in front. If I happened to have had the blue star in the back, that new color would have been green. I can come over here and do this other one. What's this? Oh, minus front. Minus front is basically going to use the object that's in front, which is my star, as a cookie cutter, and it's going to cut that shape out of the shape that was in the background, leaving behind basically the negative space that was there to begin with. There's another option called intersect. That is only going to leave behind the portion of the objects that were overlapping. So it's only going to be the portion of the star that happened to have been overlapping the polygon. And the very last one is called exclude. And instead of leaving behind the shapes that were overlapping, it's going to remove that shape. And I'll end up with this. So again, we can create, and this is very quick, right? These shapes don't really mean much, but basically it's an easy way to create more complex shapes out of simpler shapes. And then I could do this. Like, what if I put this here and selected this? I could unite those two. I could put this here, select both of these, and unite these two. And now I have that shape. So you can keep doing this over and over, provided that you only have two overlapping shapes and that you have them both selected at the same time.